Hey everyone, and welcome back to Your Weekly TheraTea Podcast. My name is Tel Williams, or Mr. Williams Pre-K. I'm a social worker, teacher, and therapist. And over here we have the lovely...
I'm Anne Marie DiPietro, and I'm still a nurse practitioner.
She's still here.
Every week.
Every week. Trigger warning. For today's episode, we're talking about disordered eating, or eating disorders. It's just now, for some reason, we flip it.
Well, I would say disordered eating is not necessarily a clinically diagnosable eating disorder yet.
Yes, right. Before we get to that.
Yes.
I feel like I could start every episode with a traffic report of me getting here.
Oh,
because
perfect.
you know that the thing I'm going to do when I get here is I'm a bitch about the traffic.
Tell me about it.
What's
I went the
going
same
on?
way you did today.
So why, pray tell, when I come here, and I think I bitched about this last week, does it tell me, hey, you're going to get there later because we're avoiding traffic on the highway?
Yeah.
On a highway I don't take.
Mm-hmm.
I've never taken it, so you're not helping me avoid by getting there longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was so angry driving here because if we take the back way, if everyone takes the back way, it's no longer the back way.
Right.
It's the front way now.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Why do you take a back way if you're trying to get somewhere?
To avoid traffic.
Thank you. So now if there's a traffic backup because everyone's taking the back way, right? And by the way, the back way is not to avoid the highway that they're saying they're helping to avoid. The highway is nowhere. You would have to go the most roundabout way to take 30 to get here.
Right.
Right?
From where we live, at least.
From where we live, yeah.
Yeah.
You take the back way to avoid traffic, to go a little faster maybe, to avoid the coppers. I don't know. Going 10 under, you got to go at least 20. I was seething. I was so mad the entire way here.
We're on Strasburg Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Baby, we're on the back road.
Because the speed limit there is 45.
It sure
so
is. You can go at least
50.
55 at least, baby. Because if it's 45 and you're going 5 over, like a cop's not pulling you over for going 5 over. Maybe 10, but even then, he's got bigger fish to fry. You know, people are blowing through, bus stops. He's got to worry about that. There ain't no bus stops on the road I'm taking. No one's open out there.
You're right.
I got so mad. So I obviously had to pass someone in a do not pass.
I avoided Strasburg Road. I went down Shady Side Road down to 322.
So that's normally what I go back all the way to the Sugar Bridge.
Oh,
I don't know. Everything we're saying Shady Side, Sugar Bridge, it sounds like Candyland.
Yeah, I know.
It doesn't sound like it's a real route, and it is.
It is.
Oh my gosh.
The back way.
The back way to get here. And somehow it's always going to piss me off.
Yeah, right? I mean, that's what we got.
Yeah. I got here and I was like, I have enough time to grab coffee at the little gas station that's like right before you turn in here.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm already like, I'm already heated. I'm already not in a good mood.
Oh my God. I haven't been in a good mood for like 24 hours. I feel like such a hypocrite, like telling my patients stuff.
I know.
And I'm like, just do as I say, not as I do. Because I'm going to sit here and rage.
We could do a whole episode on us being like, okay, those who can't do, teach. Because, and it's the weird thing is like, the entire time I'm mad, I know how I can regulate. And I know it'll work. So it's not like we tell you the guys things work. Oh, but it's not really work.
No.
It works.
Like I was consciously choosing not to regulate. I was like, I am raging all day today. No one's going to stop me.
Right.
And when I'm done raging, I'll stop.
Right.
But I'm not ready yet.
I'm not going to do any of these like self techniques that help with this. I'm like, no.
Right.
I'm not going to go get like a cold bottle of water or something like that. Or I'm going to go get a hot coffee because I'm already mad.
Yeah.
I get ready to get out of my car at the gas station. And never in my life since I got this car December 20th, and it's now April 2nd, has it done this. Out of nowhere. I get out of the car. The alarm's going off.
God.
And I don't know how to shut it off.
Oh my God, stop.
So I get in the car and I turn it on because that usually turns off.
Yeah.
Nope. It's still going. And I'm so embarrassed. There's no one else except for me at the gas station. The guy in the gas station is looking over at what's going on. And I'm like...
How'd you get it off?
I unlocked the car from the fob.
Oh.
And then suddenly I was like, oh, we're good.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm so embarrassed. I don't even want to go in. I was like, no, I gotta
don't think that's ever happened to me in my anti-Elon Tesla.
Yeah. Because I don't know. Maybe they're like, take us.
Oh
Steal
my
me.
God. I know. At the game last night, a bunch of the moms were like, oh, we saw the magnet on the back of your car. I was like, yeah, after you all came up to me and told me you didn't like my car, I had to make sure it was clear that the lesbian does drive a Tesla, just so y'all know.
Right. And that...
You middle-class white people.
And that she... Well, what does it say, the thing on the back of it?
Anti-Elon Tesla Club.
Yeah.
And it's rainbow.
I love that.
For gay.
For the gays. You're like, baby, I got this car before he was... I mean, he's always going to be a piece of shit, but before, like, it was like...
When we thought it was, like, just as bad as Nike with the child labor in other countries.
Yeah, right. People
like,
still buying the Nike.
This
is it?
Probably.
It's...
This is Lululemon. Is Lululemon unethical too?
I don't think it's unethical. They're just problematic.
Oh.
I know. But
every big corporation,
oh my
right?
gosh. I know. Like, I'm like trying to keep up. Like, the one thing I have committed to is the Target thing. But even then, I'm just like, God, I've been
What's
like...
the Target thing?
Oh, we should not shop at Target
right
now.
I don't shop at Target ever.
I know. You really don't.
I know.
I know. It's
like ever.
I remember, like, this was like probably a year ago. I was like, I have to go to Target. And you're like, ew, why? And I was like... And I was like, oh, I didn't know that we were. This was. Anne-Marie was not shopping at Target before people. She's like, I was actually the first person.
I was driving my Tesla everywhere but Target.
She's like, I'm your half-only problematic queen, guys.
And to be honest, I've never liked Starbucks either.
No, all of this is like 100% true because I feel like you're more of a. I don't even know if I say a Dunkin' Donuts kind of girl, but yeah, I was gonna say that and
Turkey Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, the Turkey Hill near, where is it? Downingtown West, I think. It has pina colada Fanta smoothies. Or Slurpees, rather. Oh no, it's a Royal Farms. Royal Farms. Sorry for the disrespect, Royal Farms.
I don't know. It's like you're the unintentional, unproblematic queen. You're like...
I know.
You're like, oh, me? Like, everyone's like, I'm just trying to start a shop at Target. You're like, it's not that hard, guys. We can do it.
Yeah, I know, right?
You were the first official like tank of the Target.
Oh my God, I know. Oh my God, yesterday before the game started. Well, yesterday, Tel and I sponsored the Coatesville lacrosse game for Morgan's Message, which is an organization for mental health advocacy amongst student athletes. Anyway, that led to me and Tel being at the game. But so before the game started, we were setting up the Morgan's Message table with all the resources and stuff. And I had on my Gossip Girl hoodie, right? So on the back, it says, you're nobody till you're talked about. So the girls were asking me, like, about the shirt and whatever. And I was like, I had this shirt in college that said, you're nobody till you're talked about, like the Gossip Girl shirt. And I was telling them that it was because, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, there was this website, Juicy Campus, at Penn State. And I was the Panhellenic president, which is the president of all the sororities. So, like, people talk shit on me just, you know, because you're nobody until you're talked about. And so I'm trying to explain Juicy Campus to them. And they were like, oh, my God, is that, like, the old thing that was in, like, Gossip Girl? Like, where they, like, talked on, like, and I was like, is that old? And they were like, yeah.
Gossip Girl?
Oh, yeah. Like, you know, in Gossip Girl when they were, like, anonymously typing on the message board? Yeah. They were like, oh, that really existed? I was like, huh. Yeah. That along with PCs and dial-up.
Yeah. Dial-up.
Yeah.
Oh, we okay, hold on. I'm going to actually type this up because we need to do a whole episode on nostalgia.
Oh, yeah.
Because I could talk about dial-up all day.
Oh, my God.
It's music to my ears, hearing that.
I know.
Speaking of nostalgia, the disordered eating that we're talking about today. So,
is that nostalgic?
It is because it started when I was a kid.
Oh.
Anne-Marie and I were talking about this. We actually talk about this a lot because I have pretty... I don't want to say severe because that would make it sound like a spectrum, but I have disordered eating. And it's something that I'm pretty open in talking about because, one, I don't think it's talked about enough, and two, especially in, like, men. Mm-hmm. So today we're going to talk about that. I'll talk about my personal experiences with it. Anne-Marie, I don't know if you all know this, but this is one of her specialties. You've worked a lot in this.
Yes. It was not even by choice, really. I sort of, like, fell into it when I was, you know, in one of the many times I quit my job for whatever reason, whatever relationship it was then. I got a job at an eating disorder program, and I was so nervous because eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric illness. And when you're working with individuals with eating disorders as a psychiatric nurse practitioner or psychiatrist or whatever, you're not just looking at psychiatry. Like, you have to do medical stuff also.
For sure.
So, like managing labs and looking at EKGs and doing vitals and like all those things that I was like so used to not worrying as much about. I mean, we worry about them with other stuff, but more related to like medications and the effect of them and, whatever. So I worked at a acute partial hospitalization program for a couple years. So every single day, Monday through Friday, I saw clients that were in the pretty acute stages of their eating disorders. Women. It was a program for just women, but I will say, there are a percentage of men. So I did write it down because I think it's important to talk about males and eating disorders. The prevalence in anorexia in males is 0.3%. In bulimia, it's believed to be more than 1%. And in binge eating disorder, it's 2%. And then the general population of men with any type of eating disorder is 2.2%. So, I mean, out of 100 people, it's still a good amount. But regardless, the program I worked in was women. And it was like probably one of the most, absolutely the most difficult population I've ever worked with across like individuals with autism that had like life-threatening aggression and self-injury. More difficult than that, for sure.
So my one of my many questions, I love picking your brains about this, and this is something that like I am very honest. I really don't have that much of an ego when it comes to therapy, or being a therapist, because I'm like, yeah, I'm probably wrong about that, And this was one of those things that depend on the severity of it. Like, I will work with clients around a bunch of stuff, but like disordered eating is something that like I feel like it is such a physical mental health issue that quite frankly, like, in grad school, they're like, it's really difficult for us to touch this because if I'm seeing a client and they come to me and they're like, I'm really dealing with the grief and loss of my spouse, and like, I don't know if it's just because of the grief, but like my body hurts so bad and like my arms are aching. I have to immediately say, I cannot see you. You have to go seek medical attention, and then you can come back when we know that this is pain from grief and not because you're having a heart attack, right? So it's really difficult to that when I don't know if the person's coming in because of medical or not. So all of a sudden, I'm always going to be very inquisitive. But do you think that the number of men is low because it's obviously lower than it would be with women? And we're speaking on a binary gender because of this. Obviously we know that there are people that are non-binary and trans at that. But do you think it's just not self-reported enough? Because like I feel like it's got to be more prevalent than 2%.
Yes, I do think so. And it's also thought, so the numbers in men have been said to be increasing, but my guess is they've maintained pretty similarly because ironically, and people probably don't think this, but the rates of anorexia at least have been stable for like decades. Like even with the advent of social media, the rates have been pretty stable. Although the rates in men have been growing, like it looks like, but my guess is probably it's because we're diagnosing it more. But I think in general, as psychiatric providers, we don't ask enough questions about eating. Individuals with eating disorders tend to be very covert. They like really like their eating disorder and they feel very threatened when people talk about it, or there's even like the suggestion that they not have it. So they're very good for the most part at hiding it. So unless you're really like looking for it, you're going to miss it. Both in men, both in women, but absolutely in men as well.
Well, I remember growing up, right? So the first time that I had heard about like disordered eating or eating disorders was like my mom had discussed it, her having eating issues, like just openly with me and my sisters, and I think it was more targeted at my sisters of just like, and I'll preface this by saying like I'll probably reference my mom a lot, but my mom was very loving but very vain. And so, like, her biggest concern, if there was, like, a horrific thing that happened in our house, I grew up with a lot of trauma, guys. But if there's a horrific thing that happened in our house, if my stepdad was arrested for a domestic dispute or something, my mom's response to that was, like, everyone, like, okay, he was arrested. We got to go get new clothes for school tomorrow because people are going to know that this happened. At least you guys have to, like, look good so people don't think we're trash. Like, it was, like, that kind of mindset. But I remember her talking about that and then, like, being very attuned to, like, disordered eating after that. And I remember specifically, like, in middle school that the boys on the wrestling team always had horrific, like, disordered eating. And, I want to say it wasn't your anorexia because they had to be able to, like, use the food for, like, energy to bulk and stuff like that. It was a lot of bulimia.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of eating and then, like, running or excessively working out to get rid of.
Well, and also their weight has to fit within a certain criteria on a very short-term basis.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they learn how to lose weight quickly, and a lot of times that's fluid, which is a problem.
Yeah. I remember one of my cousins, he would put on trash bags to sleep. Like, he'd run around the house before going to bed. Then he would open his windows up. And this was winter in Indiana. I mean, it's freezing. And then he'd put on trash bags to sleep because he would, like, shake off the weight. And I was like, this is horrific. I think he ended up started getting, had a seizure disorder because he had done it so often. But, like...
Well, when your sodium drops, you're at risk for seizures, so...
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
So that was, like, I was kind of introduced to it then, but I remember, is it typical, I guess, because we've talked about this, that, like, disordered eating changes? Like, I went from pretty restrictive eating to, then now, as we know, like, binge eating. Is that typical for it to change?
So meta-analyses have showed that in adolescence, if you have disordered eating, and by disordered eating, I mean it doesn't meet the criteria for a full-blown eating disorder, but you may, like, restrict sometimes, or you may label foods like good or bad and, like, not eat certain foods, or you may have, like, intermittent binges or whatever. But if you have some type of disordered eating, you're 18 times more likely to develop an eating, like, a diagnosable eating disorder. So I think eating disorders can definitely evolve and change, but we do know there is a pretty significant genetic component to eating disorders as well. Like, family and twin studies have showed between 28% and 74%.
Wow.
In having a familial aspect.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I'm fixing hair.
Thank you.
That's strange too, or not strange, but that's wild because my dad binge eats, and my mom restrictive ate. Girl restrictive ate until the day she died. That's not the reason she died, but girl. It's also interesting. I really should have looked this up because you said this yesterday, and like many things in my life, I thought that is so interesting. And then over my head.
What was it?
In therapy, we use disordered eating. Even if the person has an eating disorder, we won't say your eating disorder. We say you're disordered eating. That's why I had asked you. And you said, "Well, disordered eating is like what is it? It's like it's not the
It's not like the clinical diagnosis. Now, people with a clinical diagnosis of an eating disorder have disordered eating, but you can have disordered eating without meeting the full criteria of an eating disorder.
I think that's super interesting. I think that's really good to know too, as people are like using the language to talk, because they might have disordered eating, but be like, I know, and my doctors and psych providers know that it's not an eating disorder.
And I think that there are differing opinions on the definition of disordered eating. So I think one of the things that came as a result of me working, like immersing myself in an eating disorder program where like day after day I saw like significant illness, I tend to think that individuals say if they're, bulking up for, I don't know, a bodybuilding competition or something, so they're only eating chicken. So like one of my friends was like, was dating some girl, and he was like, we can't go out to dinner or whatever because she's like just eating chicken right now. And I'm like, to me, that's disordered. Like,
Yeah,
I understand that maybe you're like training for a competition,
Yeah.
but to limit yourself to one food and to then like refuse to like go out or like eat meals with other people is a red flag to me.
100%.
Now, some people might not agree with that. They might say like, oh, well, she's blah, 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 blah. Like, no one's ever going to convince me that's not disordered eating.
That 100% is disordered eating. And I think that is one of the lines of disorder eating between that and eating disorder. If the person's like, oh, I'm only doing it because I'm only doing it for 3 weeks to do this, this, and this, like, it kind of is starting the ingredients of having an eating disorder, right? But at this moment, it's disordered eating. And I think when it becomes habit or becomes an addiction, because like you said, people like their... Explain that to me. I'll explain how, as a kid, I liked it versus as an adult. But I explain the idea of like people with eating disorders tend to like.
Right. So I think that it can be a lot of things. I think sometimes there are people that identify with being sick. I think that happens less often. That in my experience, that's more when like they're in treatment and they get like secondary gains from being in treatment. I think that's more uncommon, but it definitely happens. I think a lot of it is they have body image disturbances, right? They don't feel good about themselves. And that eating disorder allows them to control something.
Yeah.
And any threat to that is like, well, I already feel terrible about myself. And now, like, if I don't have this, then what's going to happen, you know? And I think that although not everyone with an eating disorder has anxiety, a lot of people do, and a lot of people also have mood disorders, particularly with binge eating disorder and bulimia. So there's a lot of gains from having that eating disorder in terms of channeling some of those coping mechanisms that are unhealthy, like into that eating disorder. So it's sort of like, it is a maladaptive coping mechanism that people don't want to get rid of because it's what we call like automatically reinforcing. So whether you're restricting, binging, purging, there's some sort of physical manifestation of engaging in that behavior that individual gets reinforcement from. And over time, that's something that they can't stop because they get something positive out of it for them. It feels positive to them.
Yeah. And I think that's important too. Like if it feels positive, and like a lot of times people do these, like you said, maladaptive like coping mechanisms because they do, and I'm air quotes, work, right? Like not well and not in a safe way. But so it started for me. I remember I went through puberty so early, and so I like gained weight a little bit during puberty. And I was always an athlete, and I remember in track, one of our coaches had said that like I should be able to put you on a bar, like so you'd be like planking, and your bottom half of your body should be the exact same way as the top half of your body. That's insane. Like for someone to think that your legs should equate to the same amount of weight as your upper body, like there's more organs and stuff in all this. And so that kind of was like, well, I feel that I'm what they call top heavy, so I'd the boom like every time, and so that's kind of started the very, very, very restrictive eating. But I think it also kind of meshed in with my mom saying this, and this, and like thin is in kind of thing. But then also a lot of shit happened at home, a lot of bad shit happened at home. I felt like it was almost like defiant to like not eat. Or as a way of being like it would like destroy my like stepdad, who I to this day just despise. I hate, and we can't hate. Hate's an okay emotion to have. Because like he'd cook something, like I'm not hungry. And I was like, ooh, it was like a win like that. So it felt like it was like a win, and so I was doing that for a very, very, very long time. And I say also around the time that I was going through puberty because like I was just naturally gaining weight and was a little pudgy. And I think my dad had jokingly like made a comment about it. And I was like, which fed it even more, right? And so I didn't say anything for a really long time, and I could feel myself getting like really, really sick, and like I would get these horrific stomach cramps and stuff. And so I think we've talked about her before on our bad therapist episode, like the first one we ever did. This had my mom take me to a counselor, again air quotes, named Dory, and I'm going to say her name because Dory's dead, so thank God. The witch is dead. No, she's a horrific human, like. Awful. So I go to Dory, who was a counselor at a mega church. Okay, she had no credentials.
Oh,
you
one
remember?
of those.
Yeah, but she would see people all the time, either at her home or at the church.
Was she doing conversion therapy too?
She. This was the first time I went to her. The second time I went to her, again, was for disordered eating. But I was older. I was a freshman in high school, and she gave my mom a pamphlet on conversion therapy there.
Oh my God.
But this time I was in 8th grade. Okay, so a year before that. The first time I'd seen her, I was at her house, and my mom had her as like a softball or a volleyball coach or something when she was in high school, and everyone just loved Dory. And I go to her and I tell her about this disordered eating. And the entire time, I think she thinks I'm there to come out, but I wasn't ready to come out in 8th grade. No one knew. I mean, everyone knew, but no one knew.
She was like itching to start the conversion.
Oh, she so was. Because also, Dory was a lesbian.
No.
But she wouldn't tell anyone this. She just loved living by herself alone.
So she was like our girl Jody Hildebrand.
Yeah, except like Dory was very masculine. Very masculine. Very cropped haircut. Like very much shorter than mine. But not styled at all. Just kind of always wore like the board shorts and like she was a masculine woman, you know.
Was she married to a man?
No, never married.
Okay.
Never married. Never thought about marriage. Never dated. Just she anyway. Dory.
Oh, Dory and her repressed homosexuality.
Yeah. I remember going to her and talking about this. She's like, and anything else though that you want? This is what I was doing. Like I was in 8th grade, and she required that after every session, your parent comes in and she talks to them about what we talked about. And so she's like, anything else that you want to disclose to me? And she's kind of looking at me like, nope, that's it. Just the disordered eating and like, not feeling great about myself and all this. But nothing else. Nope. And so she gets up. And I don't have rapport with her. Okay, this is, and also I don't think this is something that is rapport building. She gets up and goes, "Do you want anything to drink?" I said no, and she goes, "Like soda, water, something good." She goes, "I mean, I have Diet Coke."
Ooh, yucky.
And I was like, "Oh, she is not a safe bitch to talk to." And so I remember this disordered eating happening for a while. Eventually, I kind of. I don't even say got out of it or recovered. I just kind of think that I found other coping mechanisms, and my drive wasn't like after I hit puberty and was like going to the gym more and stuff like that. I found that I also could like eat whatever I wanted, and I didn't gain weight because my metabolism was super fast, and I was constantly like either at dance or at whatever, and I wasn't over exercising either, right? I mean, I was able to eat whatever I wanted, and was fine. And that led me all the way up until the wrongful bipolar diagnosis. And that's something I want to. Now, do you think that something like the wrongful bipolar diagnosis started me into how long? 10 years? 12 years of binge eating?
Yeah.
If you guys don't know, we'll get into it. Anne Marie's the one who discovered my binge eating disorder. I had no idea. Or that binge eating disorder exists, which is why I'm very excited to talk about it. But do you think that something like binge eating disorder, at least, maybe anorexia, I don't know what medicine, do you think medicine can kind of trigger disordered eating?
That's a difficult question.
Yeah.
So olanzapine, which is the drug that you were on, is notorious for weight gain. In fact, a lot of times we'll use low-dose olanzapine in anorexia to help with when we're doing, weight building. Although I will say that with anorexia, that should always be done in a medical environment. Because I don't know if you know about this, but there's something called refeeding syndrome, where if you're malnourished, related to anything, but a lot of times with anorexia, it can be like life-threatening to start eating again. So that should definitely be supervised. But anyway, olanzapine is something that we utilize in eating disorder treatment sometimes as well. But olanzapine's a great drug for a lot of things, right? But it's horrific because of its metabolic profile. So you could literally induce type 2 diabetes in someone in 6 months, a year.
Why is it? Is it that I think the doctor tried to explain it to me because I gained 50 pounds in a month. 50.
So we really don't know. We think that there could be a genetic component that if you have a certain mutation, you may be more likely to have weight gain related to antipsychotic medication, which is what olanzapine is. It also does increase appetite, but with olanzapine, I think, and there's a lot of research to suggest that it's more than just increased appetite. Because there are people I have on olanzapine that haven't gained a single pound, ever. Which is awesome because it's a great drug, but the majority of the time that's not the case.
I think, and I could be, this could 100% be wrong because my primary care doctor was the one who put me on. Don't let your primary care doctor put you on. But he put me on this and said it can just automatically put you could eat celery and it'll automatically your body will be.
Why did he put you on it if he was saying that?
What?
He had the awareness that could happen and put you on
that
it anyway?
I could gain weight because at the time I wasn't underweight or anything like that, and my doctor had no idea I had disordered eating prior. That I had diagnosable anorexia because that was 5 years prior to this, and I was eating just fine. Didn't really have body issues or anything like that. I think I was of a certain weight that he wasn't worried about me gaining a little, but after 50 pounds even and going to him 50 pounds heavier and my blood tests my blood labs being horrific, he literally looked at me and said, "You have the cholesterol of an 80-year-old man," and kept me on it.
Well, I think too, to answer your question, you had disordered eating prior to being started on olanzapine, so yes. I think that when you increase appetite and you also have a rapid weight gain, that's going to trigger things within you that are going to potentially lead to more disordered eating.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's this thought about, you already have these automatic thoughts about weight and food and appearance and all of those things that are then getting triggered again. I always talk when I speak for the certain drug companies I speak for, one of the things I say is working with eating disorders really forces you to educate yourself about what the package insert of medication says about every study they've ever done on weight gain, because my girls would literally bring in the package insert with those studies highlighted.
Yeah.
So I could tell you things that I never knew before, and I knew what drugs they would take and what drugs they wouldn't take. And the reality is, I can't convince someone to take a drug that they don't want to take, so I had to find things that they were comfortable taking. Otherwise, I could prescribe it and they weren't going to take it. They might tell me that they were, but...
Right. But I think that's what makes you a good provider, because, it is... Whether someone has disordered eating or an eating disorder or not, right? To sit there and ignore that people can and are vain, right? I've told you multiple times, if you were hey, talk to your provider, I think this medicine would be good for you. If it causes weight gain, I'm not taking it. I'm not gonna. You can tell me that this could cure any ailment I had. I'm not taking it, right? Is that not fantastic? Mental health? Probably, right? But right now, you got to meet your patient where they're at. And I think that's something you've told me before that really stuck with me, is that if you have a client that's worried about weight loss or weight gain, and a medicine that they could and should take that would help them would cause that or could cause that, they're not going to take it. So why are you wasting your time and instead of trying to find an alternative medication that they 100%.
Right. And I think too that when I prescribe medicine, I always try to think I don't want to fix one thing and then cause something else. So even if someone doesn't have disordered eating or doesn't have an eating disorder, we know that weight gain can cause long-term health effects. So I don't want to, and that's not to say that weight always predicts cholesterol or overall health or whatever.
1,000%.
You could have perfect cholesterol at any weight,
Correct.
And you could also be underweight or at, ideal body weight and still have bad cholesterol.
Yeah.
So I will say that. But a lot of times rapid weight gain can lead to increased triglycerides, increased cholesterol, which is then going to increase your risk of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
So in general, I try to prescribe weight neutral drugs anyway, because it's sort of like sexual side effects in men.
Mm-hmm.
The occurrence rate with SSRIs, which are antidepressants, and sexual side effects in men is huge, gigantic.
Yeah.
But a lot of times a dude's not going to come in and be like, hey, Emery, I'm having trouble ejaculating.
Yep.
100%. So I basically just don't prescribe SSRIs to men, and I go with other stuff because I know that, one, they're going to a lot of times feel uncomfortable telling me when they're having sexual side effects, and two, that there's a very high likelihood that they're going to have them.
Right.
So, that's just how I practice. I try to think about those things, and weight is definitely one of them, because regardless of what I think should happen or what I think is quote unquote healthy or what I think is a maladaptive coping mechanism versus not, my job is to help people feel better. And I choose medication based on what I think that their profile is or whatever, but it doesn't even matter if they're not going to take it. So
what's the point?
I could be the smartest person on the face of the earth and give my patients what I know is going to quote unquote like take their symptoms away. But if they're not taking it, what's the point? There's no point.
I love that. No, and I love that you said too. I'm like I said, I'm honest about my disordered eating disorder, right? But there's been times that I've been heavier and healthier, and times I've been smaller and not, right? So I think I love that you said like weight doesn't always tell us someone's health or what's going on with their labs or anything like that. But the medicine that I had taken, I gained 50 pounds in a month, at least. I think maybe it was like 35, and then the next month was like 20. Yeah. And I remember I was choreographing at the time because I thought, why not have 2 full-time jobs in my early 20s? So I would teach all day, and then I would go and choreograph. I was a dance instructor. And I remember it had hit me. It was like a random Saturday. It was Valentine's Day. It was a random Saturday, and I was choreographing, and I like told the people to jump, and I jumped, and like my ankles hurt really. I'm like, oh my God, that hurt. And I look in the mirror, and something just flipped. Because when you see yourself every day, it's hard to like. And I looked in the mirror, I'm like, and it was like that moment of like, I've gained a ton of weight, and I don't think I'd noticed because I could do everything I still wanted to do, and now I couldn't. Like, and that was I was distraught. So I'm like, I've stayed active though, and all this stuff, and it was just my body couldn't keep up with it, and I was having a lot of like medical issues from this weight gain, and then the mental health issues started of being like miserable because I couldn't. It wasn't that I'd gained weight and didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like the way it looked. But it was that I couldn't do the things that I loved doing because it was so rapid, my body couldn't adjust to it. And so this started a lot of disordered eating of like constrained eating or fasting for like a day, and then I could eat, this and then back and forth and this and this. And the thing about that is, and I'll tell you guys that like fasting and then eating for this amount of times, or fasting for 24 hours, but then you can eat for 12 hours or whatever it is, right? It doesn't work. I would get ravenous. And so what started happening as I was teaching for Head Start to preschool program in an elementary school. And part of the Head Start model is that they do family style eating. So like we model good eating with our kids. And the food was healthy enough, I'll say. But I'd have 2 classes at AM, PM. So I'd have breakfast and lunch with the AM class, and then lunch and snack with the PM class. So I would have breakfast, 2 lunches, and snack before I even left work. So I was consuming probably, I don't know, easy like 3,000 calories before I even left work. Well, then I get a little hungry on my way home, or before I would go to a rehearsal to dance. So I obviously would get either a snack or, a little bit of pre-dinner. And I wouldn't tell Jason that I had dinner. So I'd get home, and Jason had made dinner, so I'd have my second dinner. And I did this for a lot. And I would like throw away the stuff in my car so he wouldn't see that I had dinner, or I'd be on my way home, and I would, even after dinner, I would look at him and I would cry. He's like, wow, I'm so hungry. And he was never like, tell you've gained weight or anything like that. But he's like in tears, and he'd be like, you just ate dinner. Like, what is going on? Like, I'd cry, but Jason, I'm like, my stomach hurts. I'm so hungry. And this medicine just made me ravenous. And I'd go to the doctor, and he'd be like, well, would you rather be like, dead or overweight? Like tell. And I'm just like, there's got to be a third option, babes. Like, it can't just be this. And so from then until you diagnosed it, I had no idea that I was binge eating because I had stopped the medicine after a while. And I was just like, I'm just going to raw dog my mental health and see what happens. And the binge eating continued. And I thought, it just permanently adjusted my sugars. Like he said that it automatically puts sugar in your system, and that's why. But I don't know if it was that. I think I just...
No, that's not accurate.
No. And I think the thing is, too, when I would binge eat, it would, like, calm down my brain because my brain was so...
Automatically reinforcing.
Oh, my God. And so I was just like, and I'd be calm for that little moment, right? And I would use... But it was hard because I also had horrific body issues and was like, oh, you're gaining weight or this, and this. Or I did theater still. I did all these things. And I'm like... So it continued for a really long time, that binge eating.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at binge eating disorder, it's really when you're having periods of time where you're eating large amounts of food and not necessarily when you're hungry. You're gaining some sort of comfort out of eating large amounts of food. A lot of times you feel ashamed of those episodes. Those episodes are happening frequently throughout the week. And a lot of times you're hiding food from other people. You're not wanting to eat with people. And I think we don't talk about it enough as a disorder because we think like, we're just like emotional eating. But it diagnostically, what the behaviors you were engaging in was diagnosable binge eating disorder. And I think for a lot of people it is. And they just think like, this is just what I do.
Do you think with like fat phobia out there, do you think that's why it's not talked about a lot? Because when I came forward 4 years ago and said I have binge eating disorder, people were like, what is that? Or people were like, I didn't know that was a thing. Or is that really a thing? I'm like, it's a diagnosable eating disorder.
I think that a lot of it is we have this predefined notion in our head of what an eating disorder looks like.
Yeah.
We think that if someone doesn't look, quote unquote, sick, they don't have an eating disorder. Right. I can't even tell you the amount of times I heard that at the acute partial program I worked at, where a girl would be sitting in my office and be like, I'm not like the other girls here. Like, they're like way sicker than me.
Yeah.
Or I'd have people that like had extremely abnormal labs, and people would be like, oh, well, they look fine. Like they don't look sick. They're not underweight. Well, I got news for you, honey. Whether you weigh 100 pounds or 300 pounds and you're purging, you could get your electrolytes to a dangerously low level to the point where you have a seizure and die.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much you weigh.
100. That was, I think, kind of what, when I went to the doctor the first, when I'd gained that 50 pounds, I did not look morbidly overweight or I wasn't morbidly obese, but I was big, and a lot of it was around my stomach, like, and it was painful how what is it, like, not bloated, but like I looked like I was pregnant. Like, it was painful how bad my stomach hurt.
A lot of times antipsychotics like olanzapine will lead to what we call like belly fat. That's a lot of times where it develops.
Yeah. And I remember my doctor being like, wow, this, and he's looking at the labs, like, your labs aren't good. But, let's increase the dosage. You seem depressed. Yeah, I told you why I'm depressed, because I can barely go on a walk with it. I couldn't walk up half our flight of stairs without, like, dry heaving. Yeah, and I remember when I was and when I would, like, if I was on like TikTok Live or when I was touring and stuff like that, and I would talk about it, people would be like, well, just like stop eating so much. I'm like, and so by the time that you diagnosed it, I was hadn't started talking about it in therapy because I didn't know it was binge eating. I just thought, boy, you eat a lot. But even then, I wouldn't realize I was eating a lot. I just kept eating, and I would be very ashamed of it, like you said, or I'd hide it, or I would eat I'd eat like a little bit in front of people, like a little bit of dinner, and then I would like go when I got home. But I remember like I was starting to see a nutritionist. My nutritionist is amazing. He's great. And it was that I was following everything he told me to do, right? And I was doing everything that he told me to do, and I wasn't being sneaky. I didn't think I was being sneaky, but he was like, just tell me what you're having for breakfast, lunch, dinner. Great. Well, I did. And he never asked about the amounts, and he never asked about snacks. And I was just, I during COVID, it got out of control. During the quarantine part of COVID, out of control. And that's when I was like, yo, hey, I think I might have an issue. And you were like, I don't know. No.
No.
I can't even lie and say I thought I had an issue. I didn't think anything.
No, you didn't say you thought you had an issue at all.
You had asked a question about, do you remember what it was about eating?
I just asked about your eating. Like, tell me about your eating.
I was like, well, I eat like 8 to 10,000 calories a day. No, I think I just told you exactly what I eat because I had that log now because I was seeing a nutritionist and you were like...
usually I screen for eating disorders, so I think I asked about, are there periods of time where you eat more than normal until you're like uncomfortably full?
That's right, because you asked something about eating disorders and like anorexia, like, and I was like, do I look like? But then you asked about eating until uncomfortable. I'm like, oh yeah, like all the time. Because at the time, my vice was a quart of ice cream like each night. I think the true kind of moment, because I think it was right before I saw you that this happened, was that Jason and I went to Rita's, and I had gotten a quart of water ice, and I ate it all in one sitting. And I'd never in my life had this happen. This was true, I think this had to be like a week before seeing you. This might have been one of the reasons why I was like, hey, Jason, I might talk to your friend who specializes in this, and that's how we met. But I ate it, all of it, and it sat here. I've never had this happen in my life. Because this was dessert, by the way. This wasn't dinner. This was just dessert that we had, and it just sat here. And I said, Jason, I can feel the food here. Like, I feel like there's a block. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm not choking, but there's like a block. And I went into the bathroom, and it wasn't purging as in bulimia. My body was physically sick. It was like something's wrong. And I was like, I've never eaten like that ever. Like that was definitely a rock bottom moment. Yeah, I remember you being like, you might have binge eating disorder. And I was like, what's that? Like no idea what that was. Because again, like anytime that I talked to my doctor back in Indiana, he'd be like, oh yeah, just like eat better. But I was seeing a nutritionist, and there were times I was eating great. I was eating really like healthy, you know.
Yeah.
And it was the amount, like constant.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I want to make sure we stress about eating disorders is, first of all, there's such a wide range of eating disorders. There's a wide range of symptoms. There's a wide range of potential consequences, both psychologically and medically. Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff out there about eating in general, right? So about fat phobia, about diet culture, about quote unquote healthy eating. Yeah. And I think, not everyone may share my opinion about this, but a lot of times when we know that there's a highly familial component. Now, whether that's hereditary, based on like the twin studies, I think we could say that it is, but also I think it's within the family in terms of like how you're brought up, right? So a lot of times I'll say to parents when they'll be like, oh, so-and-so eats really unhealthy and she'll only eat XYZ, and I told her she has to eat blah, blah, blah instead. I'm very much of the belief that when you label foods good or bad, you are creating an unhealthy dynamic that should not exist in a child. I think that stressing that you eat when you're hungry, you eat until you feel full. I think that there are a lot of people for which saying the word healthy foods is extremely dangerous. I think anyone who's had an eating disorder, and again, this is my personal opinion, not medical advice, there should be no, like, this is what's healthy, this is what's not healthy, because a lot of eating disorders create food rules. And treating the eating disorder is about breaking down those rules and doing what we call, like, intuitive eating. So where you're saying, like, you're getting your hunger cues back and you're like, okay, I'm hungry, I'm eating, now I'm full. Like, and you're moving on with your day. So for me, it's more about, like, are you eating when you're hungry and are you stopping when you're full? And I don't care what you're eating. Because if you're breaking down your food rules and you're eating intuitively, that's way better than where we were at before. And I've said that to my best friend Molly, like, about my niece, because a lot of times she'll be like, well, you can eat a dessert if you eat like this with your dinner. And I also don't believe in using food as a reward ever. But Molly and I, in college for sure engaged in disordered eating because we were always dieting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there was, and back then there wasn't a lot of discussion about disordered eating. It was sort of like, well, if you feel like you're overweight, go on Weight Watchers. You know, so we would like starve ourselves like
pills.
2 days before the weigh-in.
Yeah.
And then like binge on Subway after the weigh-in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and I think it wasn't until I started working at the eating disorder program that I was really like, oh my God, my eating was not okay in college. But I think like speaking to that, like it's not weight that predicts health all the time. I mean, we can't ignore the literature, right?
Yeah.
There's literature there that is suggestive of like risks of cardiovascular disease, et cetera. But there are also risks of cardiovascular disease irregardless of weight at all. So what I used to say to my clients, because at the eating disorder program, like I would eat in front of them. Like they would do exposures sometimes. And so if they were doing like donuts or something, like I'd just be chilling in my office eating donuts because but I got to the point, especially like at that program, where they would be like, Imri, how can you do that? And I'm like, you know, for me, it's more about like not having that food noise than like how much I weigh, what size I wear, like working with those women and seeing how destroyed their lives were by their preoccupation with food and eating was just like, there's no like body image on the face of this earth that will lead me to change the way that I eat, like restrict eating, label foods good or bad, deny myself something that I want to eat. And ever since then, I really haven't done that. And so, you know, I think that there's the focus on health. That's important, but it's not like always the number on the scale. But I do think it's highly individualized.
I agree with that.
Like, you might have someone with an eating disorder that also has PCOS, and we can't deny the fact that they have impaired glucose regulation.
Right.
So just because they have an eating disorder doesn't mean that they shouldn't potentially benefit from evidence-based treatments for impaired glucose regulation associated with PCOS. And there should be no shame in that, right?
Yeah, that's like you said, it's individualized, right? It's not a blanket thing that you can just be like, this is the answer.
Yep.
Yeah. And I like that you talk about intuitive eating. I remember when I was still seeing my nutritionist, I remember being like, so have you heard of intuitive eating? And I thought that man was going to just like smack me over the head. He's like, that is what I've been working with you, because he would get really frustrated. I was like, well, I just want to eat healthier. And he's like, well, what does healthy mean to you? And he would never be like, oh, so then this is what you eat. Because he was like, the one thing that I will say about what I loved about my nutritionist study was that he would never let me restrict. Or he'd be like, well, if you want to, do like a cut, right? He'd be like, why? What's the point of it? Why would you want to do a cut and only eat 1,200 calories to let your muscles stick out more? Like, what's the point of it? Like, he would always challenge and he would be like, I think this is like your eating disorder kind of thinking. But it wasn't until like I fully was like, oh, okay, like especially when you talk about intuitive eating and was fully been like, okay, I think this is how I go about working with my nutritionist, because like he's always tried to guide me this way, and I've always been like, I don't know about that, you know, like I don't know, it doesn't make sense exactly. You're letting me have this donut or letting me eat this ice cream, you know, but I always say that like my binge eating disorder, when I started going to therapy and all this stuff, what really flipped it for me, and we're talking about all individualized. So I don't want people being like, but that's not for everyone. I know it's not for everyone. Nothing clicked for me. Years of trying to stop binge eating disorder until I took medication for it. And it was a medication also that helps with ADHD. So I also have ADHD. So it's kind of a 2-in-1 for me. That you talked about food noise, where I took the medicine, and for the first time in my entire life, and I was 29 at the time, my brain wasn't asking, when are we eating? What are we going to eat? What food do we want? That looks good. We should eat that. Are you hungry? Like, it was gone, which allowed me then to sit there and be like, oh, I need to eat. It's lunchtime. I'm going to eat this because I want to eat this. And then I was able to stop when my stomach was full for the first time ever.
It allows you to unlearn the maladaptive behaviors that you've learned, because the eating is not as reinforcing when you have
Absolutely.
the medication.
Right.
So Lixdexamphetamine, brand name is Vyvanse, is the only medication that's FDA approved for binge eating disorder. So, it's extremely useful for a lot of people, and I wish that we had something as effective to treat anorexia and bulimia and other feeding and eating disorders as well. Though fluoxetine is FDA approved for bulimia, but it doesn't work for everyone. And, I would say, like I told you before, like treating eating disorders is by far like light years ahead, the most difficult thing that I treat ever.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, I have clients that have disordered eating, and it's not the direct thing that we are working on because, like you said, people like it, and so I don't think I actively knew I liked the disordered eating until it was challenged without medication of like, well, just stop binge eating, and I was like, but that's a coping mechanism, and like I liked the power I had with it, and I didn't know another coping mechanism, and that's why I tell people too, like the Vyvanse, the medication was not the fix. It allowed me to stop, but the fix was, I had to go. I was in therapy, and I had to talk about it in therapy because I now didn't have that coping mechanism, which caused a lot of anxiety and kind of like a downward spiral-ish kind of thing. But like it helped in the noise not being there. But then I was like, then the work comes of like, and now what do we do to cope? But yeah, that kind of fix it for me was like a holistic.
Yeah. And I think that like in terms of educating anyone listening, I think the biggest message for me is it's highly individualized, and you have to employ people that are qualified to diagnose and help you to get through it. Because I can't say, like, here are the symptoms. Do you fit them? Because it's so nuanced. And there's so many eating disorders that exist outside of anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder that may not fall into that exact criteria. But I say this all the time with, like, any diagnosis I give people. It's all about functional impairment. And with eating disorders, it's also about, like, the medical impairments, right? So I think that for me, there's so much in the media, in science even, that says like, eat like this, intermittent fasting, GLP-1s, like, and people make judgments about all of these things as if we can apply them like universally.
Right.
Now, intermittent fasting, we could talk about the research on intermittent fasting forever, and I'm not going to get into it. But the reality is there are people with disordered eating or eating disorders that will never be able to do any of those things just as a direct result of what they've struggled with already, right? So it's sort of like someone with a substance use disorder that may never be able to go back into a bar. That's their own individualized decision. That may be for them a trigger that they just cannot.
They know themselves enough to say, hey, I can't do that.
Right. And I think, looking at things like that with eating disorders is important because a lot of my clients with eating disorders will go into their primary care provider, and their primary care provider will without fail talk to them about their weight. Which is like, maybe like a little awareness would be great.
Right.
But they'll come out of the appointment and be like, Imri, my doctor told me I need to lose weight. And I'm like, we've only been working for the last 3 years on like breaking that stuff down,
Like when I got my concussion and text you that the doctor I saw at the urgent care was like, hey, have you thought about losing weight? And you were like, what's his name? Like, oh my God.
I was enraged. That it's so ridiculous. But I think that with the other thing too that we should talk about is BMI is bullshit.
100%.
BMI, like I don't even know like why it's something that we still talk about, calculate, document, has any relevance.
Why she's even in the room.
Right. It's all about like it's a range, first of all. Different people of different heights, of different ages, have different set point weights.
Right.
A lot of times with eating disorders, we'll look at an ideal body weight range, right? So like a safe range for that individual based on their own needs, their own medical status, their own stuff. And I personally hate BMI. I think that it's like highly inaccurate. And it also doesn't give us the ability to teach people that everything's highly individualized. We're literally saying like, oh, you're the same as this other person that's 5'2" and 35 years old. That's just not the reality.
If you can calculate that kind of health measurement by literally like 3 clicks on a free website of bmicalculator.com or whatever, like, I don't know. Like, I agree with you. I feel like that's maybe not the best use of like what's going on. Before we go, if you could give advice to someone who thinks that they have disordered eating or could potentially even have an eating disorder, what is your advice for them to like in seeking help? Or
so I think it's about finding a provider who is licensed and trained to assess you and talk with you. And a lot with eating disorders in particular, although I would say this across all diagnoses, but particularly with eating disorders, you have to find someone that you have a good rapport with, that you feel comfortable being honest with, that there's no judgment, and that they're going to be able to meet you where you're at. Because with disordered eating, there's a very like personalized component that might not exist with other disorders where you're feeling like directly threatened by what the provider is saying to you. Whereas a lot of times people with depression will come in and not want to hold on to their depression. Like they're getting help because, you know, they don't want to be depressed anymore. But you really need to talk to someone who's qualified. And I also think because it's so difficult to treat eating disorders, a lot of people either don't want to treat them or aren't qualified to treat them or don't have like the training or expertise in doing it. So you have to find someone who is. And eating disorder recovery is absolutely possible. It's not something that happens overnight. So if it takes you a little bit to like find a provider you feel comfortable with, I think that's okay too. And I don't think that it's something that there should be any shame surrounding. So finding someone to talk to, and maybe you don't have an eating disorder. Maybe you don't have disordered eating, but it's sort of like anything else. We think you listen to a podcast like ours or you see something online. I think self-diagnosis can be dangerous in some contexts, but it can also be helpful in that you're like, okay, I might have a problem. So like, let me do something about this.
I love that. Yeah. I agree. I think if you're listening to something or seeing something that resonates with me in a way, or resonates, whatever. I feel like that's the first step of being like, okay, then I'm going to talk to someone about it.
Or if you have disordered eating and you feel like I need to stop this before it goes any further, or you're on a medication that has significantly changed the way that you eat, like let's talk about it now. Like these conversations should be open and ongoing and individualized.
I love it. I love talking about something that's one of your specialties because I learned so much about it.
Thanks.
You should like,
even
teach
with my
on this.
millennial vocal fry, I'm still like pretty smart.
Now I'm thinking about fries. All right. Join us next time if you have questions. Feel free to ask them. Put them in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube and our
like, download, listen, watch,
all those things. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.